Real stories, raw emotions, it's true dignity. Welcome to Dignity Stories, where every voice matters. Asterisk, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The courtroom buzzed with the usual low hum of disinterested clerk whispering to a bailiff. A few spectators scrolling their phones. Sunlight streamed in through the tall windows. Dust particles dancing in its beams like tiny, oblivious performers. Asterisk, Judge Horace Callahan sat perched on his bench, face blank, but eyes sharp, the kind of gaze that scanned for weakness. He adjusted his robe like a man ready for a performance. Everyone knew Callahan tough, old school, untouchable. He prided himself on controlling his courtroom like a chessboard, and today, he thought, would be no different. Asterisk, Case 2087, State of New York versus Mary Benton. The clerk announced, her voice echoing off the marble walls. Asterisk, all eyes turned as the defendant rose from the wooden bench. Mary Benton stood quietly, hands clasped in front of her, modestly dressed, hair pulled back in a simple bun. No jewelry, no makeup. She looked like someone who'd gotten lost on the way to a PTA meeting. People squinted, puzzled. This was the woman accused of felony, fraud. Asterisk, Judge Callahan glanced at her file, and then at the woman herself. He smirked just slightly. Asterisk, you're representing yourself, Miss Benton? He asked, tone casual, but laced with disdain. Asterisk, yes, Your Honor, she replied calmly. Her voice was soft, but unwavering. She didn't look nervous. She looked precise. Asterisk, you do realize the seriousness of the charges against you? The judge continued, tapping a finger on the stack of papers in front of him. It's fraud, falsifying records, obstruction of justice. These aren't parking tickets. Asterisk, I'm aware, she said, and I'm also aware of the inconsistencies in the indictment. Page 4, for example. He blinked. Inconsistencies, he repeated, suddenly less amused. Asterisk, she reached into a slim folder and held up a document. The dates on the bank transactions don't match those on the affidavit signed by the arresting officer. If you cross-reference the timestamps, you'll see they're chronologically impossible. Asterisk, a flicker of something crossed the judge's face. Surprise, maybe. Irritation. Asterisk, there was a silence that settled like a cloud. The assistant district attorney looked over at his paralegal, whispering frantically. Asterisk, Judge Callahan leaned forward slightly. Ms. Benton, are you a lawyer? Asterisk, no, she said, not anymore. Asterisk, and just like that, the tone of the room shifted. No one spoke, but everyone sat up a little straighter. Asterisk, Callahan narrowed his eyes. Well, let's see how far your cleverness takes you. Proceed. Asterisk, Mary Benton turned to face the courtroom, her hands steady as she laid out the first exhibit. This wasn't just self-defense. This was a warning shot. Asterisk and the judge had no idea he'd just stepped into a game he wasn't ready to play. Asterisk, the court reconvened after a short recess, but the mood had shifted. Spectators who had wandered in out of boredom now leaned forward in their seats. Reporters who had come for a routine fraud case were quietly texting editors that something unusual was happening. Asterisk, Mary Benton stood alone at the defense table, calmly flipping through her notes. No theatrics, no arrogance, just a quiet intensity. High, unsettled people, more than a loudmouth ever could. Asterisk, across from her, Assistant District Attorney Kyle Rourke was growing visibly tense. He'd underestimated her. Everyone had. Quinite. Received the file, middle-aged woman, no legal counsel, fraud and forgery. He'd seen an easy win. A few procedural motions, some technical jargon, and a guilty plea. But now, with the judge watching more intently and the gallery whispering, he knew this case wasn't going to go the way he'd planned. Asterisk, Judge Callahan returned to the bench. Lips tight. Let's proceed, he said. Mary stepped forward, holding up a single page. Asterisk, this is the transfer authorization that the prosecution claims I forged. Okay. Note the signature block. The ADA leaned over his table, eyes narrowing. Looks legitimate to me, Rourke said quickly. Signed by Karen L. Owens, CFO of Axis Trust Holdings. Timestamped. Registered. Asterisk. Mary nodded. That's what I thought, too, until I pulled Axis Trust's quarterly filings. She held up a second page. They filed a CFO resignation notice with the SEC. Karen Owen stepped down 4 days before this authorization was supposedly signed. Asterisk. A stunned silence. Rourke's face flushed. He looked down at his copy of the document, as if it might change while he stared at it. Asterisk. She couldn't have signed it. Mary continued. She wasn't authorized to. The prosecution either overlooked this or ignored it. Asterisk. Callahan's brow furrowed. Mr. Rourke, did your office verify the authenticity of that signature beyond the document itself? Asterisk. We relied on the institution's record keeping, he said, clearly stalling. There was no indication. Asterisk. There was an indication, Mary said evenly. If anyone had checked. Asterisk. Callahan turned to Rourke, eyes hard now. I want a full audit of the prosecution's evidence handling in this case. Immediately. Okay. Asterisk. The ADA opened his mouth to protest, but thought better of it. Asterisk. Mary returned to her seat without so much as a glance at her opponent. The courtroom was still. Everyone felt as something rare had happened. A woman no one had expected to last 10 minutes had just cracked the foundation of the state's case. In two, Asterisk and the judge, who thought he was pulling the strings, realized the puppet might be cutting her own threads. Asterisk. That afternoon, storm clouds began to gather outside the courthouse, darkening the windows with the quiet intensity that mirrored the tension inside. Rain tapped faintly against the glass as Judge Callahan sat at the bench, fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes fixed on Mary Benton like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Asterisk. Mary stood once more, now moving with a quiet confidence that could no longer be dismissed as luck or coincidence. Placed a small stack of documents on the overhead projector and waited for the clerk to adjust the focus. Asterisk. This is a timeline I constructed from the prosecution's discovery packet, she said. Voice.com. Clear. Every date, every transaction, every witness statement, laid out in sequence. Asterisk. The screen flickered to life, revealing a precise color-coded chart. Deposits, emails, surveillance, timestamps. Looked like something a seasoned paralegal team would have compiled over weeks. Asterisk. Notice this cluster right here. She pointed, using a capped pen. The prosecution claims I accessed restricted accounts from Axis Trust's internal portal on April 14th between 10 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. They say this is the digital evidence of the fraudulent transfers. Asterisk. Rourke looked tense, but remained silent. Callahan watched, arms folded. Asterisk. Mary pressed a button, advancing to the next slide. It showed a security log from a city library system. Asterisk. This is my public access session from the same time period, same date. Library, Wi-Fi login, security footage. Check out timestamp. I was there for a poetry reading, signed copies, even witnesses. Asterisk. She tapped the paper again. So unless I've mastered being in two places at once, the timeline the state presented is, at best, flawed and, at worst, deliberately constructed to mislead this court. A soft murmur rippled through the gallery. Rourke stood abruptly. Objection, Your Honor. She's implying misconduct. Without asterisk, she's showing evidence. Callahan snapped. Sit down. The room fell silent again. Mary's gaze didn't waver. Your Honor, this isn't just about one mistake. Every layer I peel back reveals more gaps. Correct access logs, misdated witness affidavits, fabricated urgency around a bank alert that never existed. And still no forensic audit. No third-party verification. Trust in the system. System. She paused briefly. That doesn't appear to be interested in the truth. Asterisk. Callahan said nothing. He looked down, slowly flipping through the documents in front of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more careful. Asterisk. You said earlier. You're not a lawyer anymore, he said, looking up at her. So what were you, Miss Benton, before all this? Asterisk. She hesitated, not from fear, but from calculation. Then she spoke, each word deliberate. Asterisk. I was a federal litigation strategist, she said. I used to build cases like this for the government. I know how it's supposed to work, okay? And I know exactly what it looks like when it doesn't, okay? Asterisk. Callahan leaned back, the weight of the revelation sinking in. The courtroom, packed now with quiet spectators and a row of reporters, typing furiously, held its collective breath. Asterisk. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Inside, the storm had already begun. Asterisk.